Hey, welcome to the course. I'm really glad you're here because what we're about to cover is genuinely one of the most powerful tools available to non-developers right now, and almost nobody in the marketing world is using it properly. In this first video is all about understanding what Claude Code actually is, not how to install it, we'll get to that, but what it actually is and why it's fundamentally different from what you're probably used to. Most of us are familiar with Claude or ChatGPT through a chat window. You type something, you get a response, maybe you copy and paste it somewhere, job done. That's useful, but it's limited because the AI only knows what you've told it in that conversation. It can't see your files, it can't run anything, it can't actually do anything in the real world. Claude Code is a completely different beast. The official description is that it's an agentic coding tool. Let's break that down. Agentic means that it can take actions, not just respond to you, but actually do things. It reads your files, edits them, runs commands, and integrates with your development tools. It lives in your terminal, which is just a text-based interface on your computer, and it works directly on your actual project. Think of it a bit like this. The Claude chat interface is like texting a brilliant freelancer. They're smart, they give great advice, but they're working from whatever you've told them. Claude Code, on the other hand, is like giving that same person a key to your office. They can sit down at your desk, open your files, run things, fix things, and then show you exactly what they did. I know an interface like this can look intimidating, especially for absolute beginners, but trust me, it's a lot easier than it looks. Mostly it's just describing to Claude what you want in plain English and watching it work its magic. In these videos, we'll take you through Claude Code in basic details, and before you know it, you'll be building things you never thought possible. All right, let's look at how Claude actually works. So when you open Claude Code, it works from your project folder. That's its home base. By default, it reads the file names, folder structure, and content of the files relevant to your task from that directory. Think of it like giving a contractor access to a specific Google Drive folder. This is where the work lives. That's where they operate. But if you need them to reference something from another folder, you can grant them that access. The scope of what Claude can see and touch is something you control, which is exactly why understanding permissions matters before you start building. The project folder is also where your Claude.md file lives. Let's take a look at what that means. Files ending in .md are Markdown files. And if that word means nothing to you right now, don't worry. It's not programming language, it's not technical. It's just a simple system for formatting plain text. You know how in WhatsApp when you put asterisks around a word, it goes bold? Well, that's Markdown. It's just a handful of simple symbols that tell a document how to display text. Now let's talk about Claude.md. This is a file you create yourself inside your project folder, and it's one of the most important habits you can build in this course. Think of it as a standing brief, or a document you write once that tells Claude everything it needs to know about your project before it starts working. Without it, every time you open a new Claude Code session, you'll have to re-explain your project from scratch. With it, Claude reads your brief first, every single session automatically. You write it once, it does the work indefinitely. So what would you put in a Claude.md file? Many things. Things like what the project is and what it's for, where finished files should be saved, your tone and style preferences, basically any rule you always want Claude to follow. And it's written in Markdown, which is why knowing what Markdown is matters, and it's not a complicated document. It's a plain text file with a bit of simple formatting. And as we build each project in this course, writing a solid Claude.md will be one of the first things we do. Okay, let's talk about files. So unlike with an LLM, when Claude Code edits a file, it's editing the actual file on your computer. When it creates something new, that file genuinely exists on your machine, and when it deletes something, it's gone. So that means that before Claude does anything significant, you want to understand what it's planning to do, which brings us to permissions. So here we are in VS Code. Now here's the chatbot for Claude Code, and right here at the bottom, there's several options: ask before edits, edit automatically, and plan mode. Permissions are really important because they dictate how much or how little ability Claude has to implement changes without your direction. For anyone, especially beginners, you should really spend the vast majority of your time in plan mode. In plan mode, Claude tells you exactly what it's going to do before it does anything. But more than that, it will identify some gaps in your thinking. So for instance, you're building a website, it will ask you, do you want a subpage for this? Do you want a button for that? And it just helps Claude understand the architecture of what you're trying to build so that it can build something properly from A to Z. And here's a pro tip. Before you actually bring your project into Claude Code, you can do a lot of this planning in an LLM like ChatGPT or Claude, and it is far more cost effective. So go through the different ideation phase with the chatbot and then bring the project into Claude Code, turn on plan mode, and then go from there. Finally, I just want to tell you about some of the tools that Claude uses. Two of them are pretty obvious, read and edit. But Bash, you're going to see this a lot. This means it runs commands on your machine. It involves things like install this, test that, run this script, the kind of thing that previously required a developer. And then fetch is just retrieving content from, let's say, the web or documentation or live data from APIs, etc. Okay, so to briefly summarize, Claude works inside your project folder. Changes made by Claude on your files are real. You can give Claude Code numerous different permissions, but I strongly suggest you spend most of the time in planning mode. Also, the tip is to plan your project out using an LLM before you bring it into Claude Code. That will save you costs. And finally, we looked at some of the tools that Claude Code has at its disposal, like read, edit, bash, and fetch. All right, see you in the next one. In this video, we're going to cover something that will save you a lot of confusion and a wasted time early on. And that is knowing which AI tool to reach for and when. We'll map out 3 tools in your kit, show you how Claude Code and N8N work together in ways most people don't expect, and finish with some hard-won advice on prompting and keeping your credit spend under control. Let's talk about Claude Code and N8N together in 2 different ways. Direction 1, Claude Code does the heavy lifting inside N8N workflows. So sometimes you're running an N8N workflow and you hit a wall. The data coming in is just messy and the transformation is too complex or the output is too specific for what N8N can handle natively. In those builds, you can hand the heavy lifting off to Claude Code. Let's look at an example. Say for instance, a client sends you a raw CSV file. So let's say an Excel document. But there's inconsistent column names, missing values, no calculations, etc. N8N receives it fine, but cleaning it is very tricky. Instead, you connect it to Claude Code, and Claude Code runs the script, produces the clean output, and hands it back to N8N, which emails you the finished report. So in this instance, N8N handles the scheduling and delivery, whereas Claude Code does the processing that needs a real script to work. The second way is very straightforward. Claude Code can actually build your N8N workflows. As you know, N8N workflows are stored as JSON files. So in Claude Code, you can describe what you want. So for example, build me an N8N workflow that triggers every time I publish a new blog post and creates 3 social media post drafts in a Google Sheet. You simply write that in Claude Code, wait a few seconds, and it builds you that very JSON. You copy the JSON and you paste it in N8N, and voila, you have a working workflow. Okay, I should caveat that Claude Code won't do 100% of the job for you. It will get you most of the way there. So you'll have to add in your credentials. You might need to do a couple of tweaks to get exactly the output that you want. And that's why knowing how to build in N8N is essential. Without it, you would just import that workflow and have no idea what you're looking at. With the knowledge of N8N, you can scan the canvas, spot what needs fixing, and sort it out in a few clicks. So how do you access Claude Code? Well, there's 2 ways that we'll talk about here. So the first is the terminal. And if you've never used one before, here's a quick explanation. The terminal is a text-based window on your computer where you type commands directly instead of clicking buttons. There's no visual interface, no icons, no menus, just a blinking cursor waiting for an instruction. It's how developers have controlled computers for decades, and it's extremely powerful. But also, if you haven't used it, it's very intimidating. Less intimidating is VS Code. So VS Code is a free application that gives you a proper visual workspace. You can see your files in a sidebar, open them like documents, and run Claude Code through a built-in panel alongside your work. It's the interface professional developers use every day, but it's accessible enough even for beginners. It will give you visibility into what Claude is doing, which is exactly what you need when you're learning. So in section 2, we'll show you how to install it. Before we move on, I want to spend a moment on 2 things that will determine whether your early experience with Claude Code is smooth or frustrating. Consider this a word of warning from somebody who's learned some of this the hard way. First of all, prompting matters much more here than you might expect. If you've been using Claude Chat or ChatGPT for a while, you've probably developed an instinct for how to get good results. You've learned that giving good context helps, that being specific helps, that asking for a particular format also helps. That instinct is right, but in Claude Code the stakes are significantly higher. So to get the best out of Claude Code, it's important to be precise up front. So you need to know what you're building, why you're building it, what the inputs and outputs should look like, and what success actually means. Think of it like this. Think of it like briefing a contractor rather than chatting with a colleague. The more clearly you specify the job, the less time gets wasted going back and forth. And here's why. In a chat window, a vague prompt gives you a vague answer. It's annoying, but it's recoverable. You refine, you try again, and you move on. In Claude Code, a vague prompt doesn't just give you a bad answer. It sends the build in the wrong direction. Claude isn't generating text that you can rewrite. It's actually making real decisions about how your tool works, what files it creates, how it processes data, what's happening when something goes wrong. Those decisions compound. Practically, every solid Claude Code prompt needs 4 things. First, what you're building and why. So it's not, I want to build a content tool, but you want to build a tool that takes a blog post and generates 5 social media posts, etc., etc. 2, you want to be clear about the inputs and the outputs. What format do you want? 3, your constraints. So if you're writing a LinkedIn post or an X post, there's certain limitations on the text size. And then 4, what a well done job looks like. Here are a few more tips on best practices and crucially, to reduce the amount of credits you use. So Claude Code uses API credits, and sessions can get expensive fast if you're not paying attention. To stay in control, do your thinking in a Claude chat or in ChatGPT first. So go back and forth until you really specify the build that you want. We already talked about this in a previous module. Then go into Claude Code and select plan mode. Again, we talked about this before, but this helps to refine the ask so that the build is more complete. And finally, use the /compact command on long sessions. So as sessions grow, as the dialogue between you and Claude Code grows, Claude carries the full conversation history and processes it with every message. If you use the /compact command, it summarizes the session and clears that overhead. So run that when a session starts to feel long, when the answers you're getting back are not clear, or when it says that the session is over 50 or 60%. Right, that's enough of the theory. In the next session, we're going to download VS Code and we're going to play around with Claude Code. In this video, I'm going to show you how to install Claude Code into Visual Studio Code or VS Code. If you're unfamiliar, VS Code is a code editor, so think of it like Microsoft Word, but for code. If you're building landing pages and basic apps, or if you're using code at all, this is a great place to start. Once you've downloaded it, you should see an interface like this. You might need to download Git. There's instructions to do so at the top. Just follow that. You might need to go into your terminal. They can seem a little bit terrifying if you haven't done it before, but it's quite basic. Again, use your LLM to guide you through that. Or otherwise, if you need to, just search up here for terminal, open it up, and then go to Git and find this page. So here in git-scm.com/install Mac, or whatever you're using. I'm going to use Mac, so I'm going to take this one. Then you'll go back into your terminal. And then you paste the command minus the $sign and you run it and you should be good to go. Then it's just a matter of closing VS Code, opening it up, and you should get to a page like this. From here, click on integrations here on the left, search for Claude Code. Choose this top one with 4.1 million reviews and you'll install that. Trust Publisher. Okay, then once it's downloaded, you should find it up here. You'll need a Claude subscription, so just log in. Then just authorize and build something great. And there you go. You can start prompting there, and in a subsequent video I'll show you how we use it more practically. In this video I'm going to show you how I set up my VS Code. It's important to pay attention at this point because once you have a good setup, things just become much easier from there. So to start, click on File, Open, and here for instance I created a new VS Code build just by clicking on New Folder. And then you open that, and here you go. Yes, you trust the authors. Another way of doing this is through the terminal. So you'll open up your terminal, and then here write mkdir, so make directory, space, cedilla, and then you'll give it a name. So we'll just call it projects. Press enter, and you'll see once you go back into file that now we have a projects folder created. That's the most efficient way of doing it. But if you want to see what Claude Code can do, you can either open it up here or right here. Double click on the three dots, Claude Code, keeps things neater. So here we'll just say create a standard project structure. So I've written create a standard project structure with src, assets, and output folders, plus blank Claude.md, .env, .gitignore, and readme files. I'll explain what all of these mean soon. But you run that, and then let's see what happens. So here you'll get questions from Claude to allow different permissions. So we're not asking for anything that's too risky. We're asking for something pretty basic that it will create these different folders. So we're going to allow all of them. Now you'll see it not only created the files that I wanted, but it actually fixed a typo. So there you go. And you can also create files a way you're quite familiar with. So just click here for files and here for new folders. We don't have anything in here at the moment, but you'll see how this evolves. So all of these are new assets, new folders, and new documents that have been created. To prove this, just go into Open, and you'll see under VS Code builds, we now have those same assets. All right, let me explain this structure in more detail. So here you have three folders, assets, output, and src. Assets, now these are the static documents that you'll want in your project. So images, templates, reference documents, anything that goes into your project that isn't code. The output, this will be the output of the work that you do within this project. So let's say you have a large blog post and you want Claude Code to turn it into several LinkedIn posts. This is where the LinkedIn posts will live. Next, you have src, and that's where all of the code will live. So every script that Claude Code writes for you goes in here. Then we have these four key documents. Let's start with Claude.md. That's Claude Code's briefing document. Claude Code reads this automatically at the start of every session. Next, we have readme.md, and these are notes to your future self. It's all about what the project does, how to run it. It's just useful guidelines for when you're working on projects over a longer period. Then we have the .env. This is where your secret credentials live. So API keys, tokens, anything that's sensitive lives here. This file stays on your machine and never gets shared or uploaded anywhere. And finally, we have gitignore. And these are instructions to Git. It tells version control what to leave out, including your .env file. Okay, let's look at these four in a little bit more detail. So in Claude.md, we've talked about this before. It's important to keep this short, but it will have things like why, the purpose of the project, the tech stack and the folder structure, and any preferences you want Claude Code to follow. I'll give you an example. So for example, let's say we're building a content repurposing tool. We'll talk about the purpose. So it takes long articles and generates X posts, LinkedIn posts, and summarizes them. Then we talked about the stack, the structure of the project, and then rules. Remember, you can use Claude Chat or another LLM to come up with a good, concise instructions for the Claude.md file. This is what I did here. So let's remove this, and then in Claude Code, do /init and press enter. So this shortcut means a Claude.md file will be auto-generated based on the current project structure. It's a really quick, efficient hack. Okay, so here we are. So now this is the Claude.md file that Claude Code self-generated. As you can see, it's got the project structure right, but it doesn't have the purpose of the build. This is something that we'll have to add because it has no visibility into that. Okay, so now I've updated that and we can proceed. Here in the .env file, you'll store things like your API keys. So for example, Anthropic _API _key, you'll have an equal sign, and then you'll just paste what that API key is. And then in the gitignore, this again is telling Git what to leave out when saving your project. I would add the following as a minimum. So we have .env, which has your API credentials, so your passwords essentially. Then you have the node modules, and this is a folder that gets created when you install packages. It can get very large and there's just no need for Git to have it. And then the output doesn't need that either. So there you are. This is a brilliant foundational setup. One thing you could do as well is just save it as a template. Save as, and then just write setup template. And then import them all when you're setting up a new project, and it'll reduce the time hugely. Or, as we did at the beginning, you can prompt Claude Code to set it up for you. In the next video, we're going to run Claude Code for the first time and give it a real task. See you there. Welcome back. Here's where things get really interesting with Claude skills. So every time you have a repeatable task, you can now create a skill that does that task for you. So think of LinkedIn posts, brand voice documents, ad copy, slide decks, you name it. Now you can create a skill that consistently delivers a high quality output. First, let's talk about the difference between Claude.md and skills. Claude.md, as we've talked about in previous module, is a markdown file that has the overarching guidelines for Claude. So typically you'll put in naming conventions, a bit of context about you and what your role is and things like that will help Claude immediately figure out what your project's about or what you're trying to achieve. Skills, on the other hand, are a capabilities document. So they're for specific outputs. For example, LinkedIn posts, brand guidelines, presentations, etc. So skills can be installed globally and locally. At a local level, that means it's within a project folder. So you'd use this particularly if you're, say, a consultant who's working with particular clients, and you'd have everything related to that project nested within that project folder. So the skills there would be, creating PowerPoint presentations based off of the branding of that particular company. Global level skills, on the other hand, and you can see the formatting here above, those are best for ones that you want to invoke regardless of the project folder that you're working on. So for example, you want to use learnings that you're having from different projects and turn them into a personal LinkedIn post. So you'd have a guideline for your LinkedIn copy so that it can have that level of consistency and you can invoke it at any time. One last thing about global versus local. So there's a bunch of hidden files on your computer that are there. They're hidden purposely because they're not ones that you necessarily need to be interacting with. But a folder that has a full stop before it, that is a convention for a hidden one. So if you search, I've got a Mac, so Command, Shift, and full stop, you'll see a bunch of these files and folders pop up. So that's when you're saving something to your globally, you'll do it in this convention and it'll be saved in a hidden file. Just a little FYI. There are a few ways you can create skills. Manually, you can also ask Claude to build them for you, or you can choose a skill online. So if it was manual, you'd go, in this case, this is a global file, and then you'd open up a project folder there and create a skill markdown. We'll get into that shortly. That's at the global level, or within a project, you would create it inside here. Now, an easier starting point for us is to just take what's available online and use that as a starting point. So here on GitHub, if you just go to github.com/anthropics/skills, you'll find this repo. You click there on skills, you have a list of skills that were built specifically by Anthropic, the company behind Claude. So let's take this one, the skill creator. This is actually a skill that helps you build skills. It's a bit meta. So you can just open up that document, you can download it, and then go back to your VS Code and paste it in here under skills. So I've already done this, and this shows you a bit of the anatomy of a skill. So what's important here, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, is that this section between the dashes is the most important part, the name, the description. It's only when you've instructed Claude to use that skill does Claude go in and then read all the details of what the skill does, how it's structured, etc. That's a way of making the process a lot more efficient, because otherwise Claude would have to go through and read all of this piece of text, and it's just unnecessary and takes up a lot of tokens. So that's the skill creator skill that we've taken from a reputable source, so Anthropic itself. Just be careful about that, because some skills that you find online are going to be malicious, so make sure that you use reputable sources. This is now stored globally, but let's look at something stored locally, and we're going to create our own skill now. So I'm going to create a new demo project. And then within this writing style, I'm going to find a way of writing LinkedIn posts that actually work. So we're going to search for, in this case, a reputable website that gives some tips on writing a LinkedIn post. So I'll copy that URL, go back into VS Code, and then I'll ask the following. Hey Claude, I want you to create a skill for writing LinkedIn posts. I want you to use best practices, including the ones outlined in this URL, which I'm about to post. Invoke the skill creator skill to create the skill in the suitable manner, and it should live in the folder demo-writing style. Okay, and then I'll just paste the URL that we looked at there here and press enter. And then I'll skip forward past a few approvals. And I'm just going to skip forward and see what it comes back with. And just a note, it's important to review the questions that Claude comes back with. So in this example, it asks us, do we want us to just provide the topic and a few bullet points and then the skill rewrites it? Do we want topic and style examples, or do we want a full draft that we then go in and polish? So in this case, we'll go for that. And then next it's asking, do we want back and forth with the skills or fire and forget? So should it just post or draft the post immediately? We're going to go ask then write. What should it look like? We'll go with both and submit answers. Okay, so it asked a few more clarifying questions, and then it came out with this, which lives under demo writing style, under skills. It's a Markdown file, and it's in the same exact structure as the original skills creator and other skills. So it's a pretty basic one, but it receives the drafts, asks a couple of clarifying questions, and then rewrites the post according to the recommendations in the URL that we looked at a second ago. Now, it's always going to be a work in progress, these skills, and the more you iterate upon them, the better. And you can even prompt Claude to be like, okay, I want this to really mirror my writing style or the style of somebody that you emulate, and ask it, what does it need to be able to create a skill that will better result in the output that you want. So, for example, it will probably ask you to give it different samples, and the more kind of context and samples that you give it, the better it will be at crafting something that you're happy with. But for the purpose of this video, I just wanted to show you how quick you can actually create a skill. And in the next video, we're going to show you something a bit more practical. See you in there. In this video, I'm going to show you where to find skills from reputable third parties. I'm going to show you also how to determine whether a skill comes from a reputable source or not. And finally, we're going to get into a couple of builds where I'm going to show you what the output looks like when you don't use a skill versus when you do use a skill, so you can really see how effective they are. When it comes to finding sources of skills, you can think of it in 3 tiers. At the top, the most trustworthy ones are ones that are located in the official GitHubs of reputable companies. So look for Anthropic, Google, Vercel, etc. The second level, it's usually an individual, so it's somebody who's strong in the community, developers who have a strong reputation. For these, do a bit more due diligence, check out the stars, do a Google search or search for them through an LLM. And I'd say if you're a beginner, just stick with these 2. Don't go for tier 3. So if you're going to use a skill from a source that you're not familiar with, you can adopt the 6-step due diligence approach. First of all, research the author. Make sure that they have a history of real projects. Ideally, they have socials connected to it. So you can find them on LinkedIn, on social media, and there's a connection. Secondly, the longer that the repo has been around, the more likely it is the community is engaged with it. So with that and the fact that they have a high star rating, that's indicative that it's a good source. Thirdly, and this applies to the other steps as well, just approach everything with a bit of skepticism. So read the skills.md file, make sure that everything makes sense to you logically, and that the skill isn't invoking external URLs unnecessarily, or has bash commands where they shouldn't exist. Just be mindful of the logic of the skill and make sure that there's nothing in your head that is ringing alarm bells. So with this in mind, let's move over to Reddit. This post is asking for the best Claude skills to download for writing research and productivity. If you go down, you'll see the great advice is that the best skills are ones that you make yourself. Totally agree with that. They also recommend the humanizer skill. So if you search for the humanizer skill, you should come here to Blader's humanizer. If you don't know who Blader is, it's very reputable, but we'll get to that in a second. But just by your observation, you can see that it's got a great reputation, 9.7k stars, nearly 800 people have forked this repo. And then let's have a look at the README. So installation we'll get to, but this is nice. It's based on Wikipedia's signs of AI writing, and it detects 24 patterns of AI writing, and it instructs Claude to avoid it. It's got a great example. So before, this sounds very AI generated. Great question. It's very sycophantic. And then afterwards, it's a lot more concise. So these are all strong signs. Now, before using that, you can also ask your LLM, can you check that this is a reputable source? It says very reputable. The numbers, as we mentioned, the methodology. So now it's quite apparent that this is a good source and one that we can use. And now I'll show you how to install it the way they recommend. So just copy this and then go into your VS Code. So in VS Code, just at the top toolbar, click on New Terminal, and you simply paste what you got from GitHub. Press Enter, and there you go. It's done. And again, this is hidden in a .claude file, so one that you can't immediately see. Again, I'll show you how to find it. So if you search on a Mac, Command Shift full stop, you'll get all the secret files. So in here, go into Skills, and you'll get Humanizer. This is where it lives. And I just wanted to show you that because you might be a bit confused that you can't see it in any of these folders. All right, let's see what this skill can do. So first I'm going to try it out without invoking the skill, and then we'll see what it comes back with. And I'm going to dictate this to Claude with whisper flow. Claude, I want you to write a 250-word LinkedIn post about the importance of posting regularly and authenticity in LinkedIn posts. All right, let's see what it comes back with. All right, let me just expand this a bit. So it's written it directly. And as you can see, it's got some of the typical signs of AI. So it's got the M dashes. It's got, here's the hard truth, start, stay, be real. I mean, it's quite obviously written by AI. Next, let's see what it comes back with when we ask it to use the humanizer skill. Claude, I want you to do the exact same, write a LinkedIn post of the same length on the same topic, but this time invoke the humanizer skill. So this is what it came back with. First of all, it wrote a draft, which is definitely more readable than the first version, but it does have some of the signs of AI writing. Then it reviewed it and determined that there were still elements that were AI generated, and then made those changes. Now, it's not fantastic writing by any stretch, but it's definitely more readable than the previous versions. Also, what's interesting is that it will pass an AI detection test. If you paste this humanizer text into Grammarly's AI detector, and I'm sure others, it will show you that it is not AI generated. That's not condoning using this in lieu of your own writing, but just to show you that the patterns that an AI detector can detect have been removed through the skills that you've just used. And a point I want to re-emphasize is that, okay, this skill taken from the internet is a great baseline, but then you need to make your own. So again, reading this text, it's not fantastic writing, and you might want to make some stylistic changes, things like that. So I just prompted Claude Code and asked it, I want to edit the humanizer skill, open the file so I can make edits. And it pulls out the MD file. And then just go through it and find things that you want to change. Let's say here it's written in American English. I want to make sure that it's in UK English. There's some expressions or phrases that it's instructed to not use because it's too AI, but they might be ones that I particularly like using. And then another level of this could be to find writing samples or your own writing and have a dialogue effectively with Claude Code and say, these are writing samples that I want you to integrate into the humanizer skill so that I can more accurately sound like these examples. That way you're making it your own and you're not just copying everyone else. All right, let's close all this down. Remember to clear conversations before they get too long. Otherwise, Claude becomes less good at remembering parts of the conversation. So once a context window gets beyond 60% at the moment, then it can be problematic. So it's just good practice when you have new requests to just clear the conversation. I'm also going to close this down. And I'm going to look at a different skill. Here we are again in Anthropic skills. So the skill that I want to use this time is its front-end design. Let's see how good it is. Again, read a preview quickly. So what it does is it creates distinctive production-grade front-end interface that avoid generic AI slop aesthetics. And then it goes into some details about that. You need to choose a clear conceptual design direction and execute it with precision. And it goes into the aesthetics guidelines. If we want to look at the code, it's here, again in that typical format of skills, as a name, description, the license, and then some of the prompts for Claude. Again, let's download that. Okay, and then in VS Code, you can upload that file and then say something like, Claude, I want you to install this skill globally. It should be called frontend-design. Okay, great. So it's installed successfully. One thing I'll note at this point is that it's too easy to get the temptation now to just go wild and install all sorts of skills. Don't do that. Hold off, try different skills, make sure they're ones that you'll actually need in your day-to-day, and just play around with them and tailor them to your own needs. Otherwise, you're going to be using up too many tokens, things are going to get complicated, and more accurately or more relevantly, when you're prompting Claude Code, if you have too many skills, then it might mistake your request for the wrong skill. So it's important to be quite segmented with this, and also it underscores the importance of having specific skills for specific projects. So make sure that you have the relevant ones to the relevant projects, and then for the global ones, they're ones that you are indeed going to use across multiple projects. With that said, let's test it out. So let's clean this up a bit, clear the chat, and come up with an idea for front-end design. All right, with that prompt, it's come up with this, which I'm pretty damn impressed about, if I'm honest. Has this vinyl that's moving in the background. Looks pretty slick. This kind of setup looks a bit AI generated, but honestly, I am very impressed with this. So let's see if the design skill comes back with something better. Okay, and just a bit of visibility. Once it came back with the request, I just said I want you to host it locally so that I can view it, and then this pointed me to the URL. Okay, so now I'm going to prompt it again, and I'm going to say, Claude, this is great. I want you to use the exact same text, but this time I want you to design it using the front-end design skill. And let's see what happens. Okay, while Claude is building, I need to go back into this website because it is blowing my mind a little bit. Look at how the cursor is different color. Look at how the buttons pop. Claude is getting seriously good. Let's play around with this. It has options for, okay, none of the links work, of course, because we haven't given it any information really. But they have different sets. Look, the buttons pop out. Same over here. Oh yeah, nice. just by hovering over, it'll give you the price of different things. It's very interactive, and this was a one prompt hit. So you can see already how powerful Claude Code is. And this is before the front-end design skills used. Okay, now the moment of truth. I've accepted a few bash commands, and now we'll see v2. Ooh. Damn. This is cool. And I don't know about you, but this does not look AI generated. I feel maybe it's a bit loud, there's a lot going on, but it does not look like it was generated by AI. These kind of emojis, maybe I'd get rid of those. But yeah, you have the prices down there, more than a store. This is cool. So there you go. This is the power of a skill, and this is just one prompting, you know? The more details that you give it, the more context, have back and forths, it will be, you know, the possibilities are pretty remarkable. So play around with those, see what you come back with, and if you have any designs that you've made, post them in the community. We'd love to see what you come back with. So I didn't show you the prompt that I used in the first video. So look, it's just 4 lines. I asked Claude to come up with a landing page for a vinyl record store where people can buy and rent different vinyls. Also, it acts as a center where people can gather. There's a DJ set, but literally it was just 4 lines, and now you can see what it came out with.